everyone. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Sandy.
And this is the Italian American Stories podcast. Okay, well, it was pretty cool. We released an extra bonus episode yesterday of Paesani Tell.
Yeah, it was a good one, too.
It was. I enjoyed reading it and sharing that story. So thank you again, Alexander, for sending that in.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So today we are headed to our home state of Colorado and actually Mom's old stopping ground, North Denver. So North Denver, Little Italy, it's, yeah. Kind of the same thing there. It's funny, I had never heard of this story, but I was researching this month for the October post that I do for the Italian American Heritage Month, and I ran across this and I thought, oh, here's a story. And it turned into be a little bit of a deeper story than I thought it would. So
right, it's going to be a good one.
It is. It's got some twists and turns, and even at the end of it, I'm not sure how I feel about what happened. So
right, when I read the script, that's how
you felt the same way.
We haven't talked about it,
yeah. But let's get into it so you guys can understand what we're talking about. So today's story is about the tragic disappearance and death of little 5-year-old Sammy Sabell. So like always, we'll start with the family history. Sammy's father, Michael Sabell, was born in Molise, Italy in 1902. And he came to America with his parents and siblings in 1904 when he was 2 years old. And so while the family was going through Ellis Island, the immigration workers actually changed their name. So the original name of this family is Sabelli, but they took the I off of it when they went through Ellis Island. So the family settled in Colorado, and they actually first settled in Pueblo, Colorado, where his father worked at a smelter. But the family, they eventually did move to Denver, where Mike's father, he dug graves for $1 a day at Crown Hill Cemetery in Denver. And his mother cooked meals for day laborers. So $1 a day.
I know. That's sad.
Yeah, and I didn't know, I don't know the exact year this was, or I would have done the conversion, but $1 a day. It's crazy.
That's hard work.
Exactly, yeah. Now there's the tractors and all that kind of stuff, either the machinery that will dig now, but
it was all hand dug.
So Michael, who went by Mike, he married Mildred Rout in Denver in 1921. And Mildred's family, they came to Colorado from the Potenza region in the late 1800s. But Mildred, she was actually born in Denver in 1905. And now her name was changed when they went through New York as well. So after the couple got married, they bought a house in the North Denver area. And Mike was working as a coal hauler or truck driver hauling coal. And together, Mike and Mildred, they had 5 children, and their second oldest was Sammy Sabell. So Sammy, he was born in Denver in 1923, and he grew up in Denver's Little Italy. And when he was old enough to start attending school, he went to Webster Grade School. So in September of 1928, Sammy was a kindergartner at Webster Grade School, and he had a vaccination, and it made him sick. So he stayed home from school for a few days. Sometimes they make you feel achy or whatever, right. But tragedy struck on Monday, September 24th, 1928, when Sammy disappeared around 5 p.m. So apparently Sammy, he was playing in the front yard when he disappeared, and the family became aware that he was missing when he didn't come home for dinner. So the Sabell family, they spent the whole evening searching for Sammy and sadly could not find him. I know
that's horrible.
So terrible, especially because if he was in the front yard playing,
right, where did he go?
Exactly, that's just right there. Mm-hmm. There are some conflicting stories in the newspapers. So one paper said that he was playing in his front yard, but honestly, a lot of other papers reported that Sammy actually went to the school playground after school to play with some friends. But it sounds like the playground school was right across the street from the family home.
Oh.
Maybe they kind of considered that the front yard. He was just playing across the street.
Oh, okay. Still close to the house.
Yeah, enough to where probably Mom could open the door, yell his name, and he would hear it.
Right.
So after searching the whole evening, the family, they called the authorities, and a huge investigation, a huge search for Sammy starts. And so a young boy, he did tell the police that he saw Sammy that evening when they were all playing in the playground. So I'm kind of leaning towards he was at the playground.
Right. Sounds like it.
Sammy's uncle, Henry, he actually came forward And he told the police that he even saw Sammy playing in the playground that evening. So like we said earlier, the investigation started and it took full force on Tuesday, the day after Sammy disappeared. But unfortunately, Tuesday's search results turned up nothing. There was no trace of Sammy. So Wednesday, the police, they doubled their efforts in finding Sammy. And not only were officers out searching, but relatives of the Sabell family were searching, numerous members of the Italian colony, and even the Boy Scouts were out searching as well.
That's nice.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. We've come across this before. I can't remember what story it was, where the Boy Scouts are out searching. And I just can't help but think, how old are these kids? Because if they run across a deceased person, like that's a lot to see, you know?
True.
Yeah, like how old are these Boy Scouts? But so when the police questioned the family, both Mike and Mildred said that they couldn't think of anyone who would want to bring them harm. They didn't really have any enemies. And Mike also pointed out that he has no money for a ransom. So he was insinuating, if they know me, they know I don't have any money, so why would they kidnap my kid?
They were eliminating that.
Exactly, yeah. So honestly, as the days went on, the police, they were starting to suspect that Sammy might have been kidnapped because they had no clues and they couldn't find any sign of him. And other than the little boy and the uncle, they didn't really have any eyewitnesses coming forward at this point saying that they saw Sammy since Monday evening. So they were kind of like, well, maybe he was kidnapped. And not only were the police kind of leaning towards kidnapping, the papers, they really started moving this idea that Sammy may have been kidnapped. And the newspapers, they fueled these rumors with previous kidnappings that had happened in America the year before Sammy was reported missing. So the newspapers in Denver, they kept kind of comparing Sammy's disappearance to two incidents. The first one was in 1927 in California. A little boy, his name was Francis Marion Parker. He was kidnapped and killed by a man named William Edward Hickman, also known as the Fox. And then the second incident that they kept comparing to Sammy was in Hawaii on September 18th of 1928. So the same year that Sammy went missing, a Miles Fukunaga kidnapped and murdered a little boy named George Gill Jameson. That's actually not only the same year, but the same month.
Yeah, that's in Hawaii.
And the other one was in California.
Right.
And so it's, I don't know, it's newspapers, media kind of amping things up a little bit.
Well, that's true.
It's kind of interesting. Actually, when I was researching this, I kept thinking about the Lindbergh baby. Charles Lindbergh, his baby was kidnapped, but that happened in 1932. So basically, the newspapers, they were just trying to draw a connection from these two incidents to the disappearance of Sammy. I guess, like what you and I were just saying, it's different states. Maybe they were thinking like a copycat killer, those kind of things, but I don't know. I think more than anything, it kind of just freaked out the residents of Denver and put more fear.
Probably, because they probably hadn't heard of those because they're so far away.
And then it just puts more fear in Sammy's parents. Right. And so, I don't know, it's hard to say. But a lot of the families in the Little Italy area, they were keeping their children inside out of fear that if Sammy was kidnapped, that person is still out there running around.
Right, I would have done the same.
Especially when there's no clue.
Right, because you don't know if there was an accident and he's just not found, or if it was a kidnapping.
Exactly, if somebody took him. So, yeah, you can't blame him for that at all. So another theory that police were thinking about was that maybe Sammy had fallen in the Platte River.
Oh.
And that was in fairly close proximity to the house and the school. But police said that they searched the river and they found no signs of Sammy. So the police also were searching abandoned homes in the area, but they didn't have any luck. And they were just thinking that maybe Sammy, who had been running a fever the last couple of days, maybe was outside playing, started feeling ill, and wandered into a shack or an abandoned home. Just, fever and all that kind of stuff. But Mike and his father, they actually helped out searching the abandoned homes, and they weren't able to find anything. So now Sammy's mother, this destroyed her. She was just completely distraught. And by Wednesday, she was in such grief/shock that she was actually confined to her bed to help keep her calm. And her doctor was worried about her because she suffered from heart disease and the grief was just completely overcoming her. And I did see in a couple of newspapers where they said that she had a heart attack. I don't know if that's true or not because she was home the whole time. Like it wasn't like she had a heart attack and they took her to the hospital. So I don't know if maybe the newspapers saw heart disease and just took it to heart attack.
Yeah, you never know with the media.
You don't. You never know.
Apparently back then also.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just hard to figure out what they're trying to do. On Thursday, so roughly 3 days after Sammy disappeared, Mike told the Denver Post that he didn't think his wife would survive and make it to Sunday if Sammy wasn't found.
Oh, that's sad.
And Mike also said that he just honestly wanted some clue as to what happened. I think it was driving him crazy that there wasn't a starting point for him because he was out searching every night for his kid. So he was just wanting a clue. And he said that basically every time the police would search a new area, they would come back with no new clues and they would feel like they were just basically starting over every single day.
Right. That's got to destroy you.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, it's going to destroy you anyway, but just not even having any type of a clue.
Yeah, because then you're looking at Denver and thinking my kid could be anywhere.
Right.
Where do I even begin to look?
Right.
Can't even imagine. So like I said, Mike, he would get up and he would search, but his father, he would actually get up really early in the morning and go with Mike and they would go out searching for Sammy. And Mike, he was barely sleeping at this point, but he couldn't stay home. He just had to be out there.
Yeah, I couldn't neither.
No, it would be too hard.
Drive me crazy.
Oh yeah. And actually there's a picture of Mike and he's getting ready to enter a sewer. He's going in the manhole to search for Sammy. And we'll actually post that on our social media. But in one newspaper, it said that Mike crawled through 7 blocks of sewer pipe searching for Sammy at one point.
But that makes sense.
It does.
But I don't know the size of those openings.
Yeah.
Then.
It looks about, the picture, it looks like it's about the same as they are now.
Oh, okay.
So, but if you're thinking like somebody, like a worker left it open a little bit, even if it's open a little, kids can get through things like that.
Right, or the kids figured it out.
True.
Playing around.
So Mike, as the days went on, he started coming up with his own theories. So for example, he started contemplating that maybe a drunken motorist may have run over Sammy or hit Sammy. And being afraid that they would go to jail or get in a huge amount of trouble, they took Sammy and disposed of his body somewhere. So, I mean, I'm sure.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine all the thoughts that go through.
Oh, yeah. You probably have a million scenarios running through your head.
Especially with no clue.
He stuck with this theory for quite a while because I saw it pop up in newspapers over and over throughout the days. But while Mike and his father, they were out searching, a lot of the Italian women in the area, they were spending a lot of time at the Sabell home. So the Denver Post, it reported that numerous women and their small children were congregating in the Sabell kitchen. And they would discuss, they would sit around the table and discuss different theories about Sammy's disappearance. They would cook food and then they would take turns caring for Mildred because, like I said earlier, she's in bed.
She's bedridden.
I forgot to mention this, but Mildred and Mike have 2 younger kids, younger than Mike. Or younger than Sammy, and Sammy was 5.
Oh, boy.
So they have a 3-year-old, and then I think the other one was like 18 months or something. It was a baby.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so,
Well, good for those other women.
Yeah, they stepped up and helped out quite a bit. And so the Rocky Mountain News, they released an article describing the mood in the Little Italy area. And honestly, I'm just going to read the article because it paints a really cool picture. It does have a little bit of harsh language in it, but I think it does portray the feeling in Little Italy, how the Italian members were feeling. The headline says, Little Italy's heart goes out to the parents of Sammy. Little Italy's heart was out at 3629 Calumet Street last night for the sake of a lost bambino. Across the 20th Street viaduct, where the dull brick homes hug each other with abandon, was Little Italy, watching, waiting, with intensity that can only come with the Latin blood. Dim arc lights cast shadows across furrowed faces. Sammy Sabell was gone into a world that only the imagination of the Latin can come up with, more horrible perhaps than Park Hill and 7th Avenue can imagine. So Park Hill and 7th Avenue.
Yeah, they're the higher in the community. And why do they think that they don't care because they're they're in Little Italy.
Exactly. A parent's a parent, whether you have money or not. The richest person in the world, we talked about Charles Lindbergh earlier.
Right.
They were wealthy, and every scenario went through their head about what happened to their kid.
Yeah, just like earlier he said, only the Latin community can understand.
Exactly. Yeah. And this next sentence, I hate this next sentence, but I'm just going to read it. Fat mothers of Italian broods came from the security of porches to whisper in their tongue of the disappearance of Sammy, who is 5, and has been cloistered in the security of the streets around West 36th Avenue and Calumet Street. Little Italy was worried last night. Somewhere in this great city of 300,000 people was Sammy, crying for his big brother and the comforting arms of his mother. Nor should Little Italy show emotion to outsiders, but its people did, for Sammy was their own. But each searcher had only the same hopeless answer: we haven't seen anything of Sammy yet. Long after the rest came home, Michael Sabell trudged in, weary in body and heart, for another clue had vanquished in thin air. Another silent group of friends and relatives kept watch in the scrubbed, cleanly kitchen of the Sabell home, waiting for something. When they spoke, it was in whispers, for the pretty young mother, Mildred Sabell, 22, lay sick in the front room, worried over her boy. Finally, the crowds broke up in their street and moved toward their homes, maybe tomorrow. And that's how the article ends. So the last couple of paragraphs I really like.
Right. That's how things should be written.
Because
a lot of this could have been left out.
Yeah, the fat women, the comparing them to
Park Hill, and nor should Little Italy show emotions to outsiders.
No, I completely agree. Like, a lot of it is just, like we said, it's harsh language. It's very judgmental.
It's just the way they were treated.
Yep, treated and viewed.
That's so much proof in that article.
In that article alone. And then the last couple of paragraphs.
Yeah, it was heartfelt.
Was heartfelt and kind of beautiful in its own way, because it truly described the community, the way the family felt, and the way the community was taking care of the family. And I was torn about putting this article in, but,
No, it says a lot.
So, now on Friday, Mike Maranzino, who was a member of Denver's Little Italy, he called a meeting at Mount Carmel Church to discuss and set up an extensive search for Sammy. And 200 members of the Italian colony showed up to the meeting.
Wow.
A detective from the police department was also there and pledged to do everything that he could. The Boy Scouts showed up again to Mount Carmel. And the meeting, it basically set up a schedule for the following day to comb through several square miles of the North Denver area. Like I said, this was on Friday, so the search was supposed to start the next day on Saturday. And so during this meeting, they also set up a fund to have reward money. And the police, they actually offered to help with this fund as well. And in fact, the chief of police, he donated $50. And that's about $920 today.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's pretty good.
That's way good.
Yeah. And the fund, it would eventually reach $500, which is about $9,200. So $9,200 in today's money. So the police, I've got to give it to them. They did try, and they worked really hard on this. At one point, I saw in a newspaper where it said they had like everybody on the force out searching for Sammy. So.
Oh, nice.
And they were even able to get help from the local radio stations. And they basically had Sammy's description broadcasted across stations.
Oh, that makes sense, because a lot of people might not have even heard of this.
Yeah, if they're not reading the newspapers, but the radio was something then. So as the days went by, people, they did start coming forward with some information. And one man, he came forward. I'm not exactly sure when, but he told detectives that he saw a boy matching the description of Sammy riding in a truck and eating an all-day sucker. I had to look that up. Do you know what that is? So it's those suckers that they're massive. The big round ones, and they're like spirally.
Right.
Yeah, that's an all-day sucker. Me too. As soon as I saw it on Google, I was like, oh, okay.
That makes sense. I didn't know it was called an all-day sucker.
I didn't either. Yeah. So yeah, this man says, I saw this little boy, he was riding in a truck. He looks like Sammy. He had an all-day sucker. And he said that the man who was driving the truck looked like he worked with coal, like as a coal hauler, because he had soot on his face, which is kind of strange because that's what Mike does for a living. And Mike is Sammy's dad.
Yeah, that's right.
And not that I'm saying Mike had anything to do with it, but is there a connection there? Like, did somebody know Sammy who worked with Mike?
Oh, that makes sense.
Something to think about.
Yeah.
But honestly, this tip, it really didn't go anywhere. And the police, they pretty much dismissed this. Now, another person apparently came forward and said that they saw Sammy wandering around the Moffat shops. These shops, they were around the railroad, and they were a little north of the Little Italy area. But nothing really came about this either. The police, they sent up some police cars to go investigate, but they never saw anything.
Well, a lot of little boys, they all look alike.
Exactly. And if you're driving by in a truck and you're thinking, why is that little boy by himself? So now here's a twist. On that same day, so Friday, a woman came forward to the police with a really interesting story. Her name is either Catherine Parker or Barker, and she told detectives that on Wednesday, 2 men and a small boy came to her house. So the men knocked on her door and asked her to watch the little boy for them while they go to the, quote, ranch.
She didn't know them?
Well, I don't know. It's weird because she doesn't say, well, she may have told the police, but it's not in the newspapers how what her connection or relation is to these men. It's really weird. And so she told the police that when they came to her door, she hadn't heard anything about Sammy's disappearance. So she wasn't suspecting that this little boy was Sammy. But apparently something bothered her because she refused to care for the boy. And it was just a really weird situation. But like I said, in the paper, it doesn't talk about how she knew these 2 men. Like, who were they? Were they friends?
Right. And why would she, if they were friends, why would she refuse
to talk with them or to take care of the little boy?
Right.
I don't know. It's really weird. I think the thing that made the police take it a little serious was she had a good description of the boy. And she also said that the boy seemed sleepy or sick. But if this description is being portrayed over the radio stations, she probably has heard what Sammy looks like.
She never heard that he was.
Oh, that's true.
Missing, so.
That's right. She did say that. It's an odd story. So on Friday, the Denver Post, they actually went to the Sabell home to interview the family. And they reported that Sammy's little sister, Rosemarie, she would just ask the reporters, do you know where my brother is? Where's my brother? How heartbreaking is that?
Right, because you said she's 3.
She's 3.
Right.
And so she's
so sad.
She just knows her brother's gone.
Right.
She doesn't understand anything about the situation. And so the reporter, photographer, whoever, they actually took a picture of the family sitting around their table. And it's clear in the picture that there is a vacant chair where Sammy used to sit.
Oh.
But the newspaper, they actually wrote vacant chair. And it's like, thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah.
Glad you let us know that. And the family's just sitting there with their solemn faces. And we'll post that picture as well. And so the police, they also made a statement on that Friday claiming that they were not giving up hope, but they were becoming frustrated because, again, there's just no clues to go on. One detective said that they are investigating the probability that Sammy may have even been mistaken for the little boy that used to live in the home that the Sabells live in, because the Sabells had only lived in the house for about 6 weeks. So the police were thinking, well, maybe somebody wanted to kidnap the little boy that used to live there, but they grabbed Sammy instead. I think they're just grabbing at straws at this point because seems like a stretch, right?
Right.
The detective even said, like, we're getting frustrated. And so I think they're just looking at everything.
Right.
However, after this statement, the police, they received a tip that would send them on quite the wild goose chase. So around 4:30 p.m., Alice Mays, she was at her home in South Denver when a man knocked on her door. And Alice said when she answered the door, the man quickly asked her where Happy Canyon is. And so Alice said that she stepped out of her front door so that she could point the man in the right direction towards Happy Canyon. But as she stepped out and she was telling the man or pointing where he should go, she said she could hear a little boy crying really loudly in the car.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so Alice asked the man if the boy was sick and if there was anything that she could do to help. But the man, he stepped back and he reached behind him like as if he was reaching for a gun. And he told Alice to, quote, "Get the hell back in your house or I'll kill you too."
Wow.
Oh, that's a little crazy. So as Alice was backing up into her house, she said she could hear the little boy in the car screaming, "I want my mama, take me home, take me home." Very weird, right?
Yeah.
And so she said she watched the man drive off and noted that the car he was driving was a Dodge, but it had no license plates. So she was really freaked out, wasn't sure what to do. And so she called her husband, who was at work, and told him the story, and he immediately notified the police.
Yeah.
And so this sent out sheriff deputies from all around Denver and all the little small counties surrounding Denver. And they were just searching for this mysterious Dodge car, basically. They searched Happy Canyon, of course, because that's where the man was wanting to go, and the surrounding towns. And they even went, and it's funny because in the paper, they're like, they drove all the way to Parker. And now in Denver, it's like Parker just is Denver, basically, right. But there's no in between. But for Colorado listeners, they even went to Kiowa East, searching. So they really went on quite the manhunt, basically. But all these efforts turned up nothing on that Friday night. And it even says in the newspapers that was their best tip that they received.
Right.
Because if she's telling the truth, she's hearing this little boy who's distraught and asking to go home.
And why is that man so upset? You know, he could have just said, "Oh, no."
Like, no, he's fine. He's just whining or whatever.
Right. But thank you for your help.
And then got back. But he was way sketchy. So.
Yeah, so that's scary.
So the next day, which was Saturday the 29th, the massive search for Sammy started. So while people were out searching for Sammy or getting ready to start the search, they said that teams of women were spending time at this house, just cooking and taking care of Mildred. Because I think what was going to happen was the Sabell home was the hub. Yeah. So people would be going in and out. And so the women wanted to be there so that basically Mildred wouldn't have to deal with it. They could, cook food for the searchers, all of that kind of stuff. So in the morning, the search is getting ready to start. The women are heading over to the Sabell house. But before the search could start, there was some news that the body of 5-year-old Sam Sabell was found floating in a ditch that was pretty close to the Sabell home. So,
oh, no.
I know. And it's, what are we on? Like day 5 now?
Yeah, Monday to Saturday.
Saturday. And it's right when this huge search is getting ready to start. So keep that in mind because there are people out and about. And when they find this body, the news, it just spreads through Little Italy so quick. So these people who are already out and about go straight to the ditch to see the body. And there's photos that we'll post where along the ditch, there's just lines of people watching them take the body out. It's crazy. So what happened was a laborer who was getting ready to go work on the ditch, but he was driving over the bridge and he saw something down in the ditch. And so he kind of stopped and pulled over and could tell that it was a little boy. So this man, he actually got in his truck and he went to the closest grocery store, which was an Italian grocery store, and was like, "You need to call the authorities." And this Italian man who's running this grocery store, as this man is explaining, like, there's this little boy in the ditch, said he knew immediately. That's probably Sammy. And so he contacted the authorities, but then this Italian grocery store owner ran straight to the Sabell home where everybody was. So then everybody went to the ditch. So that's how that happened.
Oh, so sad.
Oh, I know. It's so terrible. So as they were lining up on the ditch, they were all praying and chanting as they pulled Sammy out of the water. And so after the body was placed in an ambulance, a lot of the members, they went back to Mount Carmel Church to continue praying, but others went back to the Sabell home to comfort and make sure that the family was taken care of. So Mike and his mother, Serafina, were the only ones out of the immediate family to go to the ditch to see Sammy's body. And I guess as soon as Serafina saw the body, she just started screaming. She almost fainted. And people from the crowd helped her back to the house. And Mike, he was in complete shock. The newspaper reporter stated that Mike, he just looked exhausted and stunned. And he eventually spoke and only said, quote, "I know Sammy was dropped in the ditch last night. I searched this ditch from one end to the other. I know he couldn't have been there."
Oh.
So that's an interesting statement. And it makes me wonder, did somebody have Sammy?
Right.
And they were holding him for a few days before putting him in the ditch?
Yeah, if if they searched it.
Exactly. Because even according to the newspaper, the ditch was within 3 blocks from the house. So I have to believe if Mike is going down into the sewers, he's searching this ditch that's that close to the house.
Right. Yeah, probably several people did.
And actually, it's funny you say that because Mike's brother, he came forward and said that he searched the ditch with Mike. He even said that he was pretty sure at one point the ditch was drained. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. Because a worker comes forward and says, no, the ditch was never drained. So who knows? But here's an even crazier point. 2 Denver patrolmen said that they searched the ditch looking for Sammy. And while they were searching the ditch, they even arrested some boys who were shooting birds right around the same area where the body was found. So it sounds like a lot of people searched this ditch. This is where I start wondering and questioning what happened.
Right.
But onlookers said that Sammy, he had a bruise on his head, and this kind of got people thinking this from someone hitting him, or was it from Sammy maybe falling? And because the ditch was down, and so if he was at the top of the hill and he fell, did he hit his head and then go into the water? And the other thing that was interesting at the crime scene was, and this is just so weird to me, Sammy was caught by a broomstick. So I'm not exactly sure how he was caught, but it sounds like his clothes were maybe caught on the broomstick and he was kind of tangled up on it. But the odd thing is, in one paper, they said the broomstick was standing straight up, as if someone shoved it into the ground. So it's not like it's leaning, or it's just straight up.
Laying down in the water, I could see a piece of clothing getting tangled up on it.
Yeah.
That's weird.
So another paper said that the man who found Sammy, he said that the boy was actually hanging over the broomstick. So that doesn't make sense to me unless he, like a piece of clothing, like the broomstick is standing up and maybe Sammy's coat was caught on it and he was kind of hanging. I don't know. There's a lot of mystery around this broomstick.
Yeah, because how tall was it sticking out of the water?
And for it to be just, I don't know. It's really weird to me. I feel like there's got to be something to that, or it's completely misreported in the newspapers. Right. I don't know.
That broomstick thing's weird.
It is. It's very odd. And so the body was taken to the coroner's office, and Mike actually went to the coroner's office at the same time because he wanted answers. He was very perplexed at this point, kind of like we are. I mean, like this just doesn't make sense. When the coroner's report came back, the family was shocked and completely disagreed with the report. The coroner said that Sammy died due to drowning and had probably been deceased for 4 or 5 days. And the coroner said there was no evidence of foul play, and the only mark on the body was a bruise on the left wrist.
What about the one on his head?
That was just what the onlookers saw. And so the onlookers were telling the newspaper that's what they saw. So, I don't know. Well, the family disagreed with it. The police, however, they were satisfied with the coroner's report and they closed the case. The chief of police said that part of the coroner's report was that there was a film of silt covering the body. And he said, I don't believe that could have formed overnight. That had to have been over a few days. So he did assure the family, though, that he would continue to take tips or leads on the case. If anything ever came forward, they would continue to investigate it. But I want to briefly talk about the difference between a coroner and a medical examiner, because there was mainly coroners back in the day. And so the main difference between a coroner and a medical examiner is how they are selected for their job and their professional status. So a coroner is an elected or appointed public official who certifies the cause of death. Coroners are just, the definition says, lay people who may not have professional training. In some states, they can order autopsies, but they are not necessarily considered doctors. And so a medical examiner, however, has medical training. They're required to have a medical degree. The qualifications can vary by location. Some jurisdictions have additional training in law, pathology, and forensic pathology, where coroners, they kind of just collect the evidence. They have details about death, but they don't have a medical background. And a coroner in the 1920s usually had no medical training, while a medical examiner in the 1920s was a licensed doctor. You know, I'm not completely disregarding this coroner, but something to think about. Right. Sammy's funeral was held on Monday, October 1st. The mass was at Mount Carmel, and he was buried at Mount Olivet. The attendance of the funeral was massive. The paper reported that almost all of Little Italy showed up. And the community, they also really stepped up to help with the costs of the funeral. The Boulevard Mortuary, they didn't charge the family anything. And then members of the Italian colony, they bought the children new clothes for the funeral because Mike had not been working since Sammy went missing. So money was really tight for the family. The Denver Post was apparently at the Sabell home during the funeral services because they reported children were playing in the backyard and women were sitting at the kitchen table just trying to comfort Mildred. And the reporter said that there was a statue of the Virgin Mary near the women. And the reporter also pointed out, this is kind of sad, that there was an old wooden fruit box in the corner of the kitchen that held Sammy's toys. Yeah, there was things like a wooden gun, a train, a jack-in-the-box, just those little details. It's like, oh, geez. So Mike and his brother Henry, they were at the home also. They were sitting in chairs by the kitchen door. And the paper said that they were just reminiscing about how Sammy loved to ride in their work trucks with them. And they both enjoyed taking them on little rides. So...
yeah, so sad.
Mike told the reporter that he didn't believe Sammy drowned, but that instead he, quote, he died of fright after being kidnapped. And he also pointed out again that he and his father and his brother had searched that ditch numerous times since Sammy disappeared. So just a lot of unanswered questions.
I would like to know how deep that ditch was.
So I saw at different points, it was like 1.5 feet. And then there was like a trench where it got up to 8 feet.
Because you hear about here in the canals, if it's deep, I could see if he fell in and he got in that undertow and it got tangled up on something and then eventually got released and then floated to the top.
I thought about that too.
Right.
And it does look pretty substantial.
That
and
he's
he's little. He's only 5.
Right.
Yeah, because it happens here all the time. You almost get stuck in the whirlpool underneath the water. So I think we talk about this later on, but we can mention it now. So he was caught against debris. So not only was the broomstick there, but there was branches and that kind of stuff. So if he was caught in that ditch and there's all that debris, he could have been pulled under and stuck on a branch. But Mike, he swore that he would ask for an inquest into Sammy's death. You know, like we talked about, he couldn't accept this coroner's ruling. And a lot of the Italian community agreed with Mike and thought that Sammy's death involved some sort of foul play. The coroner and the police department, though, they did turn down Mike's request for an inquest. They said that they believed that he drowned, especially they kept going back to that film of silt that was on him.
Like a rock being down there. It takes a long time for all that to get covered up.
And that's what the police chief said. There's no way that film would have been on him within one day. Sadly, with this, the family, they had to move forward with numerous unanswered questions. In this tragedy, it was so hard on the family. Mike and Mildred, they ended up divorcing 4 years later in the summer of 1932. Mike, he did remarry, but he remained a part of his kids' lives. He passed away in Denver in 1969. Mildred, she passed away in 1984. And hopefully Sammy's siblings lived a long and happy life and, moved on as much as they could. As I was researching this, I ran across an article in the Denver Post, and it was dated September 28th, 1928. So that was the Friday before they found Sammy's body. And it discusses how a 14-year-old boy escaped from a man who was trying to kidnap him. So that's kind of crazy, right?
In Denver,
yeah. And like I said, this was the night before Sammy was found. And I'll just go ahead and read the article. The headline says, Denver boy barely escapes pursuer by fast footwork. And so the article says, quick footwork on the part of Ben Topol, 14 years old, 2808 West 11th Avenue, is believed by Denver police to have saved him from being kidnapped Friday night. The boy, who was on his way home, noticed an apparently empty car parked at West 11th Avenue and Decatur Street. When he looked in, a man sprang from the front seat and pursued him for nearly 2 blocks. He reached home just in time.
Oh, wow.
I know. It's, that's probably not even
scary too.
I know. And probably not connected to Sammy's, but as I'm researching this, I'm like,
happens on
the night before. I was like, oh my gosh, what is happening? So that's the sad, strange, mysterious disappearance and death of sweet little Sammy Sabell.
Yeah, it was a interesting but very sad.
It is.
Ending.
Yeah, it is. And I'm still not, I don't know. There's part of me that thinks, he probably drowned. And there's part of me where I'm like, well, who knows though?
Yeah, it's too bad that the ditch never got drained, that could have answered a lot of questions.
Yes, for sure. Because they would, like you said, they would have known immediately. So, like I said, we'll post those pictures. And if you want to send in a Paisani tell, our email address is itamstories@gmail.com. We would be honored to read your story or your family's story. Well, we do hope that you enjoyed listening to the mysterious story of Sammy Sabell, and we hope you come back to listen to more stories about Italian Americans. See you next time.
See you next time.